Just a second. I'm Hubert. I'm a filmmaker, visual effects artist. I've done some educating and stuff. And I don't know what to do with all my slides. It's going! Oh, okay. And I love film's ability to kind of like transport you into somewhere kind of fantastical, kind of be like a fantasy world simulator. And that works better if it actually feels kind of believable, if it has some like texture and all of that stuff to it. And the best way to do world building is to kind of ask yourself, why would this be like that? And if that's true, then why would the next thing kind of be like that and so forth? I know, oh, just a second. Let me take half a second too, let's see. Oh no, that's my pun. All right, yeah, so there we go. Okay, we're all synced. I couldn't see anything down here. And I've talked to some people who want to make like a film who go, I can't start writing until I've done all of the world building or whatever. And it's like, you can never design an entire world. You have to start with the basics, and then you kind of go through granularly and fill things in when, where you want to. But to get a head start, I like to borrow from the very best world I know of, 1995's Waterworld. No, if you haven't seen this thing in 4K though, you should. No, the real world. And literally as I was writing this script, I was sitting there at a table and I look up and I realized every single thing that I could see, you could make like a 3-hour YouTube video rabbit hole about. Like the hills and the waterways of Puget Sound go north to south because they're like the big grooves left from a 2-mile glacier that scraped across things 10,000 years ago. Tides, the 70-year-old ferry system, the fact that there's an orange in the glass. How is there, those aren't native to my area. How is there an orange in the glass in like February? If you want to do world building, figure out how the citrus gets to where the citrus kind of wants to go, which is all very kind of like, that's great, Ian, it's a beautiful world. But it is a beautiful world. So last time I did a talk, I was very excited about, like, you can take a picture of a building, you can put it on a building, it kind of looks like a building, which is still true. Actually, a thing I like to do is if you plug the image texture into the strength of the emission with some sort of threshold, the bright parts of the image will actually cast light into your scene, which is a really good way to add like a little bit of extra life to a nighttime scene. But it's 2024 now, and I'm getting tired of seeing like all the polygons. Everything just kind of looks like squares with JPEGs on it. And I want to know what it would feel like to actually sit on that ledge, like what it would if you touched it. Which is why I've, been trying to film in a lot more actual real-life locations when I can. I like to have everything the actors are interacting with real and tangible and gritty and covered in barnacles and all that. I've also been using a lot more photo scans, which is kind of the 3D version of an image texture. And so I'll take those and I'll cover those with barnacles. Barnacles are the gravel of animals. And I don't need to explain what photo scans are. We've heard about photo scans for the past 10 years, but it's where you take hundreds of pictures of an object and plug it into like whatever your 3D program is, Polycam or Reality Capture, or I use Metashape, and then out pops a 3D model. You can bring that into Blender, which makes it sound easier than it is, because sometimes after a scanning day, I'll literally spend like 5-6 days just cleaning stuff up. But with the asset browser, you could just build up a library and then you do like the scan once and you can use it on everything for the future. And so like this crane here only took me a couple minutes to make because it's just drag and drop in some of these pieces, and it's only for the background of this one shot here, but it looks kind of like it exists in the world. Same with this bulldozer thing. That's just a bunch of different pieces of like, if I'm driving along the road and I see some construction equipment, I'll pull over, I'll be like, all right, let's scan this little greasy bed. Which is fun, because that means I get to focus on where I put my energy. And what I wanted to do was design it. So as I was like eating lunch, I drew out some of the ideas for the mechanisms and all that, blocked it out a little bit, and then just cover it with the photo scans. And I get to borrow the visual language of like the actual construction equipment and the grime without having to spend weeks actually hand doing everything. A couple years ago, I wanted to work on a sequence that took place in kind of this like, after this big war, in this war-burnt society with like big broken tectonic plates and all of that. And to make it, I just walked through my town scanning the specific bits that reminded me of the world I was trying to make. Like if I was in a big park and 99% of it didn't work, I would scan the one little kind of rusty pole that did, which was fun to kind of like, I don't know, just like filter real life. And I scanned all of this stuff on my phone. There's really good like phone scanning apps now. And so it's just walking around grabbing real life clip art, basically. Nathan Begdahl, I did a lot of stuff with. He's also a great animator. He animated those little guys. My friend used to collect bones, so one afternoon I scanned the bones and like, turn them into a grocery store, or like a tractor was in the park. Scan the tractor, you can use booleans, cut them apart, mix up a new thing. I like being able to like make hero props for the foreground, but using a lot of photo scans for the mid and background still gets that kind of tangibility somewhat without having to like spend forever on it. I've got a big old collection of roads and ground pieces. You don't even need that many because you can just kind of like copy and paste and rotate and scale, and if you're doing instancing, that's really lightweight on RAM too. There's another, I like taking little skulls, making them real big, Game of Thrones kind of thing. I was working on the credit sequence of the Pete episode where I wanted this kind of Rise of the Freeway Pirate sequence, and what I wanted was kind of this big delivery on a very silly premise, and so I leaned very heavily into photo scans. Everything you see here is the same, just like scanned with my phone. That's a 3D scan of Nathan Begdahl right there. All the grounds, everything is all the same. It's just my same two friends over and over too. And I got tired. Eventually, like, you'll realize you kind of have a blind spot. You come up with a way of doing something, and then years later, you're like, I haven't even thought about the way I do that. Like putting JPEGs on roads. Everything just felt like JPEGs all the time. And so, oh, there we go, that was me. And so I walked around town, found little bits of potholes and everything, kind of made a whole little library that feels a lot better. Although you'll notice it's always erring in the direction of adding more grime and everything. Like, what if you wanted an actual nice, pristine, perfect road? Yeah, that's harder to make realistic. It basically just means you have to really, really dial in how it's reacting to light and that material and all of that, which is where I try to make sure I never write anything with perfect roads. Also, famously, lens and camera artifacts like grain or diffusion, lens flares and all that. You couldn't save, do you remember this guy? You couldn't save a CG render in Photoshop 20 years ago without Photoshop adding this on top of it somewhere. So I took pictures with all of my lenses that I shoot on. Just thinking, I wrote too long of a thing, so I'm going to try to go really fast. Is it counting down or up? Oh, it's counting down. We're doing fine. So I pointed my, you can see even the edge of like my cell phone case around that flare there, but I just have a little library of the actual flares for each of my lenses, and I'll stick those into the scene. And if you use a layer weight going into a color mix node, multiplying in black, you can make it so you can only see the plane when it's pointing directly at the camera. So if you parent those to lights, like a bunch of different lights, you can have automatic lens flares and glints kind of coming in and out, which is a lot of great automatic texture that'll make your CG stuff really match your live action stuff. Also, video textures. I like to film actual little bits whenever I can, like these little bits blowing as the taxi drives by. Recently, I filmed a bunch of my laundry on top of a green screen. Just cut it out with a knife tool, lay them all out, and with the geometry nodes, made it so they all appear on a curve. This is all I know how to do in geometry nodes right now. And yeah, steam, very, very hard to calculate in the computer. I still don't know how to do it, so this is just a mug of hot water that Lex and I filmed in my backyard, and I use it absolutely everywhere. And this is a good transitional shot, because how do you get your footage into a 3D environment? We kind of just transitioned right into that. Well, it turns out, if you track your footage and then project from that tracked camera, it'll effectively cancel out and stabilize the footage. So if you model a low poly version of geometry based off the point cloud of the track shot and put your camera in there, it'll project and effectively stick the footage onto that geometry. And if you can actually add a new camera that kind of doubles the real camera and add your own camera move, which is how I do basically everything now. I'm just always projecting on the low res geometry, and it makes doing digital extensions really easy because you're working with the footage all in that same 3D space. Like if I want to add a little garbage or something onto the ground, it's just, you just stick it in the scene. This is my dream workflow. I've been doing that for everything. Look, you can just add box towers. If you want to add a person in there, I've been using Magic Mask and Fusion, but I just got a message from Magnum VD, who has an add-on that might let you do it right in Blender, just like cut people out, stick them in there. The default UV project modifier in Blender right now requires you have a lot of geometry, but Nathan Beckdahl made us a little add-on that lets you just do it independent of geometry. I've been using that for everything. You can get that on the Eat the Future GitHub. We've put a lot of our different tools up there. And what I like is you only need to have like a little nook for the actors to be in, kind of have their little reality, and I get to take care of later extending everything. It's really nice. Oh yeah, or like, we'll build a corner of an actual set so the actors get to sit at the bar and deal with everybody else and kind of have their little world, and then yeah, I'll just fill in everything else. Oh yeah, interactive lighting is huge. If you can have the CG casting light on the live action footage, or like casting a shadow or something like that, I find that really, really helps sell the shot. Like here, this is me just swinging an LED bar over Josh, and the complexity of everything else in the digital scene makes it seem like maybe more is going on. The same here, this is Tom's wife, Amy, just swinging a light bar over his head kind of randomly. And I thought it'd be really hard to sync up, but as long as I have a street light passing by at approximately the right time, as long as everything's kind of moving, it was actually really forgiving. I was really happy. And also the fact that I can, because it's in there, I get these free reflections and refractions. He's actually there inside the taxi. I also do a lot of color grading. If you use a color mix node set to divide, you can use the eyedropper tool. You can select something that you want to be white. If you hold down Alt, you can kind of get a range of colors, and divide that cast out of the footage, which I use to make a lot of different image textures match. Just make sure you set the value to 1 so it doesn't also change the brightness. And the same with gradients. You can use a gradient to mix between two things. If you create a gradient and give it an object texture coordinate and use like an empty, the empty controls that gradient. Then you use the gradient to control the mix between like two colors, maybe two different versions of the same footage, but one of them is darkened up a bit. And then the empty is controlling a vignette, which I use all the time. Like in this shot here, I thought the edges of the seat were too bright. They should have been kind of shadowed by the taxi. And so yeah, just use a vignette to bring the focus back up onto his face and hide all of my sins in darkness. It works really good. Same with like blending in a transparent shader. That way in 3D space, I can actually just blend from the footage into the digital extension. Or if I want to like blend geometry into the footage, I can do that on a shader level. I'll just use a color mix node to kind of blend in and match all the values. But if something's too bright, sometimes I'll just stick a plane there and set them up so they're casting the right shadows and just turn off the visibility for the camera. That works good. You can also, if you give the plane a transparent shader, you can adjust the brightness of the light going through the transparent shader or tint it any color, which is really nice for getting everything to blend. Taking another breath break. So when you put, here we go. I forgot when I hit next slide, it automatically plays the video. What's cool about being able to put your models in, like the footage in the scene is actually interacting with the 3D models. Like it's casting light onto everything, but it's a one-way thing. You can't also have the 3D models interacting with the footage. Like it's not, you can't have a shadow on an emissive layer. And I thought that was just a thing I had to live with until Nathan one night came out and was like, hey, I just tried baking the footage, which is where you calculate all of the light hitting the footage, dividing that out from the footage, and then we were able to deal with it like a diffused material, which has been so cool for doing more complicated digital extensions than I ever thought. I need to make better documentation for it, but it's called Compify. It's available on the Eat the Future GitHub right now if you want to play with it or use it for anything. You can even relight the footage. It's the next stage of that kind of dream workflow. Letting me do things that like otherwise I literally don't know how I would do. So photo scans have been really big. Honestly, the biggest thing of the past 6 months is I've just started putting little gunky bits on planes on top of absolutely everything. Like that little tarp thing in the back, if I tried to do a little cloth sim and texture paint and everything, that would have been so hard, but this is just a picture. And this is like a low poly scene covered in little JPEGs, and it renders so fast, it's really efficient. Like I'm rendering on a 4090, which is a beast, but I'm also rendering like a full volumetric 3K high quality render at a minute per frame. Like, this is, these modern times are wild. A quick note, normally fireflies are caused by like just one thing in your scene, so the trick for getting better render times is just to try to find that one thing that's causing the fireflies and fix them, and then you can kind of like dial everything else way down. GPUs. Okay, but what about motion? I'm not a particularly great animator. I have infinite respect for actual proper character animators who can put life and soul into things, but I try to use motion tracking and motion capture when I can. I've got like a little Rococo suit and I can put on, and I'll just animate all these people while I'm just like standing in my office at 3 a.m. They're a little, because of my scanning process, a little bit uncanny, so I try to always keep them in the background, but I kind of like that restriction, like real green screened people in the foreground, weird nightmare people kind of in the background. I've done hundreds of scans of friends over the years. If we're ever hanging out and there's kind of an awkward lull in the conversation, I'm like, go put on the costume, here we go. But if you look at him too close, it's like, just don't look at him too close. I used to have a full giant lighting setup and we'd go nuts, and then I'd have this whole de-lighting thing I do on everything to kind of like make everything neutral. But it turns out if you just stick some lighting panels on a camera, as you scan, that light is just flattening the texture, and you're de-lighting as you scan. You make sure there's good light everywhere. You don't even have to be in a particularly well-lit place. And the big trick with scanning is just, like a person, is if their arms are gonna be out, give them a stand to put their hand on, because otherwise, it's gonna turn into a big blob. Actually, the biggest trick is just use the most light-sensitive camera you can and get like the deepest depth of field and like the fastest shutter speed, because what it's using is that texture. And so you just want as much texture in every single frame as possible. So after I get the scan, I'll bring it in the blender, set up some cubes, and yeah, and that's basically as easy as the cleaning process is. I usually do chop off the hands, because even with the stand, the fingers are gonna be blobs, but we have a little mocap rig we put together with hands already on it, so we just have to line it up, and it all works. The bag here, I'm really happy. That's just, I duplicated the mesh and made it a cloth sim and turned up the inflate and like pinned certain bands around the arm, and it just looks like that. And that's, I don't know what to use it for yet, but okay, so, let's see. For everything else, I kind of use IK chains. I didn't even know about IK chains. I thought it was a really complicated thing. They're so easy. They just say, hey, all right, connect this string of bones from here to here. And whatever you do on one end, the IK chain just kind of makes it work. And I love when computers just make things work. And they're really easy to set up too. You create an armature, you extrude it out into a little chain, you create a control bone. In pose mode, select the control and the target and hit Shift-I, and it automatically creates the chain. And you can pair the control bones from some chains onto bones on other ones to make things that look really complex, even though it's just a bunch of nested IK chains. It's fantastic. You can also like limit the specific rotational axes of different bones, which makes it really easy to do like robot type rigging. There's a very silly moped building robot in the background of a scene I was working on, and it's just literally that. I mean, you can just, I like that you can design a thing and then just kind of stick a skeleton in it. So usually what I'll do now is I'll model a thing, then I'll rig it, and then I'll do a final modeling pass where I just get rid of any obvious intersections, and the end result of that is it kind of ends up looking a little bit engineered. Those levers have IK chains. Those have IK chains. Everything is just IK chains and photo scanning. Those rocks there are from my grandfather's rock collection. They're like a little piece of coral, just copied over and over. All those modules inside there are like from the inside of a B-29 like bomber. And I still do a lot of hand modeling too. It's just nice to only have to do it if I want to, and have everything else still feel okay without having to start from zero all the time. Oh yeah, this is from a sequence I'm about. I'm almost done with the episode of Dynamo Dream, which is the thing I've been working on, coming out in like a month. Yeah. Oh, thank you. This landing gear, it doesn't make any sense at all, but it's just a big mess of IK chains. I love IK chains so much. They're also my favorite way to do pistons. You can make one, like the middle one stretchy, and lock the rotational axes of the other ones, and they'll just always point at each other without intersecting there. It's great. So, yeah, okay, but that is just one thing controlling the movement of everything else. But in real life, everything is affecting everything. It's like the car wiggles the antenna also wiggles the car, the tail wags the dog, and all of that. And that's why I've been getting really into rigid body simulations. Because I don't know, I'd only ever use them until like, here's a big box. And, I'm out of time. Let's do this one. So, yeah, we'll just get through this last thing. Rigid bodies. There's three types of things, basically. There's passive objects, which interact, which do, and then there's constraints, which is you don't actually apply onto the objects, it's like you apply it to an empty, and that regulates the relationship between the other two. And you can add all of these via the F3 search bar. So, you select the ground, and you say add passive, select the car bits and say add active, and if we hit play, it'll all follow the ground, it's already set up, that's great. So let's stop, go back to frame 0, select the car body so it's active, and let's search for connect rigid bodies. And that gives us this great little menu where we get to pick the type. Let's pick generic spring and the location selected. I think it tends to work better when the axle is on the x-axis, so I'm going to rotate that. And then all we have to do is decide what the constraint is actually constraining. And so I'm going to make all of these 0 except for the actual axle axis, which we leave open. Going to limit the translation of all of these too. If you hit Alt-Enter, it'll update all of the constraints at once, which can save you a bunch of time. But now if we hit play, it'll actually kind of roll, which is cool. Let's give it a little bit of spring on the z-axis, and to do that, we just have to give a little bit of give on the translation and go down to the spring settings, turn that on, maybe turn it up a little bit, and yeah, it's that easy. You can also do like motor constraints, which will actually propel things, which is fun. You just be sure you save a lot, because you know why. Here's motion tracking. I hand-tracked a bunch of different camera motions from real life, and Nathan Vegdahl helped put them all into an add-on that lets you just drag and drop, basically, real-life camera motions onto a digital camera. It's called Camera Shakeify. It's also on the GitHub. And yeah, now I've got an episode coming out in a week. We also filmed a few other ones. Because of the Patreon, we were able to film on a real boat, which is my Waterworld dream. And so, again, trying to like not have to build everything green screen from scratch. We're just enhancing what's already there, so that's exciting. And look at this, 30 seconds left. Oh wait, no, that's negative. Never mind, I'm over. All right, thanks guys.